Win big in 2024 with Team Sync from RotoBaller. Import your fantasy teams and sync your leagues. Get customized tools and tailored advice for your specific rosters and scoring settings, including live recommendations from the Live Draft Assistant, Free Agent Finder, and Lineup Optimizer. Sync an unlimited amount of NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL fantasy teams from all of the major fantasy platforms. Get a discount for any premium pass using my promo code Knuckler. Just visit rotoballer.com/radio and start rotoballing like a boss. Fantasy football right around the corner and fantasy basketball and hockey right around that corner. So get that for someone who you know will enjoy it coming up. And this podcast is also brought to you by Parlay Play Fantasy Sports. Use my referral code RotoBrady. Get that sweet, sweet deposit bonus. They got paid contests coming to a state near you. They got free play. And they're giving out boosts and slashing lines and bonuses all day long. Check that out. That's a real fun platform. And what is up, everybody? This is Brady Grove bringing you episode 145 of RotoBaller's official MMA podcast, Tap That. And we are looking forward to UFC Abu Dhabi this weekend.
Break out the red panties.
This week we got PFL, One Fight Night, LFA, Terrence Crawford's fighting. A lot of MMA and boxing going on. For picks on all of that stuff and stuff on UFC Fight Pass, follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. Follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on YouTube, Facebook, and Spotify. Check out my weekly MMA DFS value picks article coming out on Fridays now. We still have some interlude episodes in the works. You know how it is with those football prospects trying to find their next professional team. They tend to be on the move. So we got 13 fights coming up on UFC Abu Dhabi. That card kicks off at noon. Thank God we got an early card. Come to the RotoBaller MMA Discord. Let's talk DFS and sports betting strategy for UFC Abu Dhabi. Again, we got 13 fights on this card. A quick word about last week. Weird event in how many of the results played out and the fact that it was the middle of the night in England. That's not awesome. You could tell that it was the crowd was, wanting for energy at different points, as you would expect it. But, Starboy and Makayev, that was a fight where if they just would have let them go at the beginning before they did the whole introductions, maybe that would have been an exciting fight. It's very frustrating, and the whole, drama going on with Makayev. Look, obviously, they didn't cut him because he's boring. They cut him for a combination of things, because there's a lot of boring fighters, and it's never warranted, getting cut on such a massive winning streak when you're, sledged to be a top contender. Obviously, there's a multitude of factors there. But as a Starboy fan, I can't help but blame, for the most part, Starboy for that fight. You figured out at one point that you were keeping him at a distance. You were strong enough and explosive enough and fast enough to prevent Makayev from getting his takedowns. And you're not taking advantage of that on the feet? It's hard to blame the winning fighter in a boring fight. I blame the losing fighter who had every opportunity to capitalize. Even with how little he did, he still had a chance to win that on the judges' scorecards. If you just do a little bit more, that would have been a huge win for him. And he let that huge opportunity go. Tom Aspinall making quick work of Curtis Blades. I thought that finish was just a little bit quick, but, I think that the point had been made, really. I don't have, any gripes about it. And then, holy shit, Belal Muhammad beat Leon Edwards. Wow. Wow, it was a dominant performance, really. The scores didn't come out that far apart. It wasn't like it was a blowout, but it was just very decisive rounds for Belal and a perfectly executed game plan. A guy that if you would have asked me a year or however many years, 1, 2, 3, 4, if you said, does this guy have what it takes to be a future welterweight champion, I would have absolutely said no. So to get that done at 36 years old, beating Leon Edwards, and again, that's what I mentioned last week, is that weird bubble Leon's been in, fighting only I keep saying that, Kamaru, Colby, and Nate Diaz. It puts you in a weird space when it's actually time to fight a real contender, someone who's just going through the ladder, as opposed to these super fights, pretty much. These huge matchups. This one was just different, and he just didn't look he just looked kind of defeated at a certain point in that fight, and there was no speech this time that could rouse him and get that miracle moment. Very close at the end of the 5th round. He could have finished it. I swear. If he had 15 more seconds, he could have finished that fight. And again, no one to blame in that situation but Leon. You had your chances, but Belal just executed fantastically. And by God, Belal Muhammad is the current UFC welterweight champion. Unbelievable. Unbelievable, and it made so many people angry, as you would expect. But on to this Saturday, all right, because we got a card in Abu Dhabi. It's another big one. And I think there's got, a lot of really good fights on here. So let's start off with Cedricus Dumas and Dennis Tia Llewellyn at middleweight. Dumas is the -218 favorite. Tia Llewellyn, the +180 underdog. Let's start with Tia Llewellyn, all right. Winner of 1 fight in 5 UFC appearances. He's been finished in every loss to Aliaskab Kisraev, Jung Young Park, Gregory Rodriguez, and Christian Leroy Duncan. Now, to be fair, that's a pretty tough stretch. There's not an easy fight in there, and it's, that's several hard matchups. Here's where you get me. Your only UFC win, September of 2022 over Jamie Pickett. And unfortunately, that just doesn't count a whole lot. And I would have said similar. One, you go to Cedricus Dumas, who is 7 years younger. This is a guy that I have given a lot of shit to in his time in the UFC. I thought that fight with Cody Brundage was one of the worst fights I've ever seen. But he got the win in it. He did what he needed to do. And then he had a much better performance in a fight I actually thought he lost against Abu Azatar. And I had Abu in that fight. But then he's coming off a first-round knockout loss to Nursultan Ruziboev, March of this year. Yeah, all right. I can give Tia Llewellyn the credit for, he's fought some tough guys. But I guess Cedricus Dumas kind of has at this point. The other loss is to Josh Friend. To make this one simple, your only win in the UFC being Jamie Pickett. I don't care, because the other guys you fought have made it look easy against you. And Dumas, at least he's younger. He's got a huge reach. This is just a fight where, Dumas is just good at grinding fights down to his pace. If you don't greatly outmatch him, where you can overwhelm him or you can put him away early. So I got to go, I got to say Dumas probably wins this fight 75 times out of 100, 70 to 75. It seems crazy to put that much confidence in him. But Dumas by decision is where I would go there. I'm not really touching either of these guys in DFS. I think Dumas will be too pricey for my taste, for what I think he's capable of. But, I think maybe if the guy, who is the more likely to get a finish, I'd actually say Tia Llewellyn. I maybe Tia Llewellyn by knockout. If I'm going with a method of victory, I'm going there. That's not by decision, because I think Dumas by decision makes the most sense. Next up, we got a lightweight matchup between Jai Herbert and Rolando Bedoya. Bedoya, the +120 underdog. Herbert, the -142 favorite. Let's start with Bedoya. Loser of 2 fights in the UFC, both by decision, both in 2023, to Chaos Williams and Kenan Song. He actually landed 112 strikes against Song and 149 against Chaos Williams, outstriking both of those guys, and lost a split decision to Chaos Williams. So that's a combined 261 strikes across 2 fights, 0 decision victories. Born in 1997. Herbert, last win in the UFC, July 2022, by unanimous decision over Kyle Nelson. He only has 2 UFC wins for as long as he's been around, and he's remained pretty active, at least 2 fights a year since 2021. Losses to Francisco Trinaldo, Renato Moicano, Elia Taporia, a draw with Ludwig Klein. He's coming off a unanimous decision loss to Faris Zayam July of last year. The 2 wins, the other one is a knockout over Kama Worthy, October of 2021. Herbert isn't like ever a big volume striking kind of guy. He can keep people at a good distance with a 77-inch reach. But, Chaos Williams, I think, presents maybe some similar problems to Jai Herbert. The problem is, I think that for the results that Bedoya has had in his first 2 UFC wins, the statistical output that he has achieved, being, what did I say? Being 9 years younger than Herbert, I think this is the one that he gets it done in. I think that, he can outstrike Herbert here, or at least just land a greater volume. And I think that even betting on this by split decision wouldn't be crazy, because I think Herbert will have the more meaningful strikes. I think that, I think that those will be more powerful and do greater damage. But Bedoya, I think he wins like 45 to 50 of these out of 100. Bedoya by decision, hit it. And I'll give him a sleepy look in DFS. When you're an underdog, and I think that you can land triple-digit strikes like he has in his first 2 UFC appearances. And again, even though you're 0-2 in the UFC, it's been a good, group of opponents. Kenan Song actually has won more than he has lost in the UFC, and that can be easy to forget. Next up, and I think I said Bedoya by decision makes the most sense to me. I guess if I'm going with a method of victory here, outside of a decision, I'd probably say Herbert by knockout. Next up, we've got a women's strawweight matchup between Victoria Dudakova and Sam Hughes. Sam Hughes, the plus 142 underdog. Victoria Dudakova, the minus 170 favorite. Let's start with Sam Hughes. All right. Professionally, 8-6 as a pro. It hasn't been that bad, though, in the UFC. Started off rough, a 3-fight losing streak to Tisha Pennington, Loma Lookboonmee, and Luana Pinheiro. But she has now won 3 of her last 5 since April of 2022 over Estela Nunes, Elise Reed, who, she landed a combined 119 strikes across those 2 fights. She got slightly outstruck by Nunes, but she about more than doubled up Elise Reed, and she got a combined 6 takedowns across those 2 fights. A unanimous decision loss to Piera Rodriguez in between. She got taken down 5 times in that fight. A unanimous decision win against Jacqueline Amorim, April of 2023 at UFC 287. And now she is coming off a unanimous decision loss to Yasmin Uruguay. February of this year, it was a close fight, getting outstruck 94-83. It was 30-27 on all 3 judges' scorecards. Dudakova. All right, I would say I got to say to Sam Hughes,
don't do this. You cannot do this,
This is kind of a different level of dangerous, for Sam Hughes. And that's going to... Sam Hughes, she got knocked out by Tisha Pennington, December of 2020 in her UFC debut. She hasn't lost, inside the distance since then, but Dudakova very well could be the fighter to get it done. I think that Dudakova, born in 1999, is a very versatile prospect for strawweight. She's coming off a win against Jin Frey where she outstruck her 74-47. She got a knockdown in that fight. She put Estela Nunes very quick away July of last year with a first-round knockout. And got 4 takedowns in her unanimous decision victory over Maria Silva, August of 2022. So, if I'm going Sam Hughes, I'm probably going by decision, and that would have to give credit to Sam Hughes that she could keep up on the feet, and that she would need at least 2 takedowns to get that close. Sam Hughes has had her chance to prove herself as a prospect for strawweight. She's more proven herself as someone that can hang around in the UFC and be competitive. But at where she is now after the last few years, the upward trajectory on Sam Hughes has really waned. It is all there for Victoria Dudakova. A super young fighter and has had 3 very impressive performances in the UFC. Victoria Dudikova, I think, wins this fight probably like 75 to 80 times out of 100. I think minus 170 is a really good value. And I think that she's a really good value in DFS, whether it goes to decision or whether she ends up getting a knockout. Sam Hughes by decision is probably like maybe the easiest to pick method of victory for one of the two, but because I think you could split on Dudikova by decision or by knockout. By decision makes sense because I think Sam Hughes has the UFC experience and, has some things that she can fall back on if stuff starts to get dangerous. So I'd go by decision, then I'd go Dudikova by knockout. Next up, we've got a lightweight matchup between Guram Kudhaladze and Jordan Vucenic. Vucenic is the plus 185 underdog. Kudhaladze the minus 225 favorite. This was originally supposed to be Guram against Abdul Karim Al-Sawadi. We were also supposed to get Vicente Luque and Nick Diaz on this card, to remind you. And maybe it's best for everybody if that fight doesn't happen. Anyway, let's start with Vucenic. I believe was going to be on the Contender Series. 13-2 as a professional, 28 years old. No, I think he was just recently on Cage Warriors, like super recent. It was like 2 weekends ago, I think. Currently, 13-2 as a pro. All right. 6 wins by submission, 2 by knockout, 5 by decision. This guy has 1 loss in his professional career since his first loss, April of 2018. They got a lot of wins in Cage Warriors in between. 3 straight split decisions in Cage Warriors. That's hard to do no matter what. He has a split decision win over Paul Hughes. All right. Paul Hughes later avenged that loss by beating him by unanimous decision at Cage Warriors 145, November of 2022 for their featherweight title. But he has split the series with arguably the best prospect in the game right now, recently signed to the PFL. So Vucenic is a very dangerous last-second replacement for Guram. And born in 1996, Guram born in 1992. He is 1-2 in the UFC, has not won since his UFC debut, October of 2020. That was against Mateusz Gamrot by split decision. He got a knockdown. That's what saved him because Mateusz got his, 5 takedowns, but ended up losing that one. Lost a split decision to Damir Uzmagulov, June of 2022, and is coming off a knockout loss to Elvis Brenner, July of last year. That is that's 3 tough opponents for sure for Guram. I mean, you're only finding, for the most part, good records in the UFC from even those last 2 opponents that beat him, let alone the win over Mateusz Gamrot. That was 4 years ago, though. And Jordan Vucenic, I think, is going to be really highly motivated in this fight. This is a big opportunity getting to step in like this on the Abu Dhabi card. He is a definite prospect at 155 pounds. Again, Paul Hughes is, arguably the best prospect in all of MMA, now with PFL. And to have go what I think was 10 rounds with Paul Hughes, or at least 8, and you come out victorious in one of those fights, maybe it's crazy to go with a last-second guy like this. But I think Jordan Vucenic can get this done. Plus 185, I think he can win like 40 of these out of 100. Maybe even 45. Guram, I get why he is minus 225, but it's been 4 years since you've won in the UFC. And, that was a split decision, but it doesn't matter. That part doesn't matter because that was Mateusz Gamrot. And I'll give you credit that, the 2 guys that beat you since then were good, and that was a close fight against Damir Uzmagulov. But Jordan Vucenic is a dangerous guy to be taken on short notice, and so you better not be overlooking him because that could be a problem. Jordan Vucenic.
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
Oh, don't be scared, homie. Come on.
And I would tend to go like Vucenic by decision. I would also think Guram by decision. I do think that this fight goes the distance. if I had to pick, the methods of victory for these dudes, Gurram, probably not by knockout. He hasn't had a knockout in 5 years. So maybe like Gurram by and like that still makes the most sense. Vucinic, maybe just like inside the distance. But, his last 4 wins are all by submission, so maybe you go by submission, maybe he catches Gurram. I think that's the next route, and I think that there's a good case for both of these guys in DFS, and I think, Jordan Vucinic could be well priced. Next up, we've got a heavyweight matchup between Louisville, Kentucky's own Don'Tale Mayes and Shamil Ghaziyev. Ghaziyev is the minus 238 favorite. Don'Tale Mayes, the plus 195 underdog. Let's talk about Shamil first. All right. So you get that what was a sloppy appearing submission victory in the Contender Series over Greg Velasco. Sure. That happens, especially in the Contender Series. But you got a quick finish. He was winded afterward, but, that doesn't matter as much when you can put people away quickly. Then against Martin Buday, he was dominant against Martin Buday. December of last year at UFC 296. With a second-round knockout, 49 strikes to 8, he was absolutely dominant against Buday, and we thought it put a lot of those concerns to bed from his, Contender Series win. Then was very horribly overmatched against Jairzinho Rozenstruik. The cardio issues reared their ugly head again. Got outstruck 127-22. I thought in that fight that, he'd be able to use his mixed martial arts skills. I thought he'd be able to get a trip up against the cage. I think I was talking to Cody from Blood Money MMA Bets for that episode. But, I thought he'd be able to initiate something, get him in side control and go for a choke, something like that. But he just got dominated by Jairzinho Rozenstruik March of this year. And that seems like that was so much longer ago. But Ghaziyev, this is a guy that is like, considered like a prospect still for heavyweight. The dude's 34 years old. Don'Tale Mayes is actually 2 years younger than Shamil Ghaziyev. Winner of 2 of his last 3 fights. And this is a guy that, especially counting his Contender Series fights, has actually had a surprising amount of appearances in the UFC. And he's fought Cyril Gane and Rodrigo Nascimento. He's beaten Roque Martinez and Josh Parisian. He's lost to Augusto Sakai and Rodrigo Nascimento again. But he's won 2 of his last 3. He knocked out Andrei Arlovski June of last year, and he got a unanimous decision over Cal Machado last time out, April of this year. Got a knockdown, got outstruck 76-67. But, ultimately ended up winning 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. This is where the gap between Martin Buday and Jairzinho Rozenstruik gets really interesting.
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
No, don't be scared, homie. Come on.
I think that it is a strong possibility. This is almost a 50-50 fight. I think that it's very possible that Ghaziyev gets winded again. I think Mayes can, handle striking for 3 rounds with effectiveness and with power. And I think that, if you get Don'Tale Mayes down, there's a good chance that Ghaziyev can, do good damage and can work towards a submission. I think Ghaziyev by submission is a very real possibility. But I think Mayes, maybe by knockout, but still by decision and doing damage on the feet and hitting him hard and, using his superior size, 6'6", 81-inch reach, and being the younger dude. I think Don'Tale Mayes has every chance in the world in this fight. Don'Tale Mayes.
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
No, don't be scared, homie. Come on.
As far as the money line, goes, Don'Tale Mayes is a different, more dangerous animal than Martin Buday. I think plus 195, I think that there is value there for Don'Tale Mayes. Certainly not going with minus 238 for Shamil. And this started off with Don'Tale Mayes at plus 220, and it's worked its way down. So there's also, I think Mayes by knockout is a possibility. It took Rozenstruik 4 rounds to get it done. So, that's a question. But it's very much a possibility. And I think that, in a Don'Tale Mayes winning performance, he lands at least 65 strikes and possibly gets a knockdown or at least leaves Gazaev's face bloody. By decision, I think that's more likely to be Don'Tale Mayes. I think that the longer that this fight goes on, we've only seen Gazaev, wilt. I want that to not be the case because even though he is 34, he's still a guy that you could see making his way up, but there's not much time to improve. So that's where I stand on that one. I think this is very close to a 50-50 fight. Ooh. I'm actually interested in that. When people shit all over those, prelim heavyweight fights, I get it. But I'm still interested to see who wins these. Even just for, if you're rooting for that fighter. And it's hard to see where these guys, move up too much at heavyweight. But, matchups have to be made, and I am interested in who wins that one. Lightweight. Cali Fernandez against Muhammad Yahya. Yahya, the plus 310 underdog. Fernandez, the minus 395 favorite. Fernandez, loser of his UFC debut by split decision to Mark Diakise. I'm sticking with that. Me and Connor had that problem last time. I had it. Lost by split decision in a fight where you only saw 36 combined strikes. And 23 strikes and 1 takedown was enough over Mark's 13-3. By split decision November of last year. Born in 1995. Muhammad Yahya, the UAE Warrior. Born May in 1994, lost his UFC debut to Trevor Peek, getting outstruck 61-43, taken down 4 times to 1. He did try a submission down there. And just a little bit, let's go before the UFC. 12-4 is Yahya. 7 wins by knockout, 2 by submission, 3 by decision. You would think with the name Yahya, you think it'd be mostly submissions, but no. He was on a 5-fight winning streak in the UAE Warriors organization before, his UFC debut loss. And, pretty much spent a lot of his professional career with UAE, which is a really strong organization. Has a win at Bellator 191 back in 2017. So he's been around for a while. It just has not, for a good amount of time, it just has not been just not a ton of activity at 12-4. And Fernandez, 29 years old, 4 wins by knockout, 2 by submission, 2 by decision. Came in via LFA. And this one, I think, does make a lot of sense. Like, Diakise does do that to people where, he can beat you in a fight where he does very little statistically. He's always been kind of a mass takedown volume kind of guy. And, he does weird things to people. He presents a really tough stylistic matchup. But, coming in from Shooto Brazil, coming in from LFA, which is an organization I respect just as much as UAE Warriors. But I think I prefer, the younger Fernandez. I think that he had a more impressive UFC debut. It was close with Trevor Peek, but Trevor Peek is, a wild junkyard dog, but I just, Yahya, I'm just a little less impressed with what he's done before the UFC, and I'm just like a little less impressed, I think, of what he did in his start with the UFC. I would expect somebody fighting Trevor Peek to, get in a decent amount of strikes. You land 43, you get a takedown, but Trevor Peek took you down 4 times, and, that's a dude that I would expect you to hit a certain amount of times because he gives you those opportunities. So I don't know. This seems like a crazy line just because both these guys are 0-1 in the UFC. It started off at Yahya plus 260 and has worked its way up. I don't know. I go Fernandez. I guess I go Fernandez just like inside the distance. Yeah, I guess I'll go. I think this fight will end in a knockout either way. That's been the majority, the most common denominator between these two guys over their professional career. I think Yahya by knockout is not going to be a horrible value, but I think Fernandez by knockout is probably the most logical thing. And either of them, at least Fernandez inside the distance, I think makes sense. I just think in the spot that these guys are in coming off a UFC debut loss, I think that this is one that is not going to see the judges' scorecards, and either guy by knockout makes sense. And I think that there's value here in DFS as well. At least in Fernandez, he's going to be expensive, but Yahya, and getting into a firefight, and I could see him being, in that $6,900 to $7,300 range. That makes sense to me, depending on how your budgetary issues shake out. Next up, we got a light heavyweight matchup between Alonzo Menifield and Azamat Murzakanov. Menifield, the plus 170 underdog. Murzakanov, the minus 205 favorite. Let's talk about Azamat Murzakanov first. Born in 1989, has a 71-inch reach, coming off 4-0 in the UFC, counting the Contender Series. He's 13-0 as a professional. And by the way, he's nicknamed the Professional.
Break out the red panties.
Those wins came against PFL contender at heavyweight Matthias Scheffel, Tefan Nchukwi by knockout. These first three come by knockout. And Devin Clark, August of 2022. Last fight in the UFC, April of 2023, by unanimous decision over Dustin Jacoby, outstriking him 67-64, a takedown each, and got a knockdown of Dustin Jacoby in that one. Now, Alonzo Menifield, actually 2 years older, will have a 5-inch reach advantage. He only has one loss since December of 2021, and that's with 6 fights after that. He had the draw with Jimmy Crute, where he had the 2 knockdowns but got taken down 6 times. It was a majority draw, but wins in that time by knockout over Oskar Mazarov and Misha Serkinov. Then he has the draw with Jimmy Crute, comes back, submits him with the guillotine, July 2023, a part of the In Jimmy Crute party that was going on. That was at UFC 290. He, too, has a unanimous decision victory over Dustin Jacoby. And what was a close fight, but I ultimately agreed with the scoring. And that's not always the case with a Dustin Jacoby fight. It was 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. He got outstruck 93-68. That happens against Jacoby, the skilled boxer and kickboxer, but he got a knockdown, got a takedown. He is coming off a very, very fast knockout loss to Carlos Ulberg, May of 2024. How much can I credit that against him? Ulberg is on a 6-fight winning streak in the UFC, with almost all of them being by finish, 1 decision, 3 knockouts, and a submission. So, what I would have thought was a kind of middle-tier loss for Alonzo Menifield, I think has lately been proven to be anything but. We just don't have a blemish for Azamat Murzakanov. And to outstrike Dustin Jacoby was very impressive, too. Here's the thing. This one's going to be a close one, too. Alonzo Menifield, this line has remained almost constant since it came out. It was plus 165 at first for Menifield. I think Menifield can win like 40 of these out of 100, maybe 45. I don't think it's quite a 50-50 matchup, but I think plus 170 is decent. I prefer that to minus 205 from Murzakanov. Now, I do think there's a very good chance that this does not see the judges' scorecards. Both of these guys are prolific finishers. They're going to hit each other hard. Azamat has a combined, has 4 knockouts and 4 knockdowns and 3 knockouts in his UFC tenure. That's going to be dangerous work for Alonzo Menifield coming off a knockout loss. He's very capable of getting this done. And I think it's all over I don't think you have to pick a method of victory. I would think probably like by decision for Menifield makes the most sense. It's hard to say that I could see him finishing Murzakanov when he has such a sterling record in the UFC, but I could see him hitting him hard, and using that reach advantage and his strength to his advantage. And, getting 2 rounds out of the 3, even if you get outstruck, still, if you land the bigger punches in this fight, that's going to be get you a really far way to getting the win. But, again, I think Murzakanov by knockout is the clearest method of victory. I wouldn't rush to pick a method of victory for Menifield, but then I'd go, by decision, and then I'd probably just go, inside the distance or by knockout. I think both these guys are very playable in DFS. I think cannons are going to get thrown around in this fight. The question is, does it go 1 round? Does it go 3? And, Azamat, you get an impressive win here, and, it really sets you up for a big next fight at light heavyweight. Moving up quickly because, Dustin Jacoby's a great measuring stick, and it's only been, solid names at least that Azamat has taken on. He's looked very impressive in the UFC. And Alonzo Menifield has worked to get to this level of respect. So it's a very interesting crossroads for these two dudes. Next up, we've got a lightweight matchup between Joel Alvarez and the aforementioned Elvis Brenner. Brenner, the plus 164 underdog. Alvarez, the minus 198 favorite. Let's start with Elvis Brenner. Again, 3 wins in 4 UFC fights. Split decision over Zubair Tukhugov. And then 2 straight knockouts against Guram Kutaladze and Kyan Krzyzewski. That was November of 2023. He is coming off a unanimous decision loss at UFC 301 to Maitbek Orolbai. Got outstruck 65-48, taken down 5 times to 3. 1 knockdown for Orolbai. That ended up being 29-27 on all 3 judges' scorecards. And he's born in 1997, by the way. Joel Alvarez will have a 5-inch reach advantage. He is 4 years older. Lost his UFC debut to Damir Ismagulov, February of 2019. He has now won 5 of his last 6 fights in the UFC. All inside the distance. We got 2 knockouts and 2 submissions. Oh, wait. That doesn't add up. That's 2 submissions. 3 submissions, 2 knockouts. Over Daniil Bayardo, Joe Duffy, Alexander Yakovlev, Thiago Moises, and Mark Diakais. That was his most recent fight, July of 2023. Beat him by second-round Darce and outstruck him 42-20. 1 UFC loss after his debut. That was February of 2022 by second-round knockout to Arman Sarukian. And he got pretty thoroughly worked by Arman Sarukian. And it's weird, the activity has kind of not been there for Joel Alvarez. He's got 1 fight in the span that Elvis Brenner has stacked together his 4. And Orolbai now has won 2 in the UFC. Looked very impressive doing it. So that's a quality, loss for Elvis Brenner to have taken. And, did his best to keep that one close. And Joel Alvarez is, like, always a dangerous guy. I think that both of these fighters, again, are going to be playable in DFS. I think minus 198 is a little much for Joel Alvarez. And he started off at minus 120. And people were hammering it, I guess, and hit it up to minus 198. I think I like Elvis Brenner plus 164. I like the greater activity level. He's probably got the higher quality, names that he's beaten in the UFC. But I was impressed with how Elvis Brenner was able to get the 2 most recent wins that he has. And Orolbai is an understandable prospect to lose to. Brenner being born in 1997, still kind of approaching that greater upward, still working towards what his potential at his peak could be. I think like Elvis Brenner, you could go plus 164 with him. I think that he wins this fight like 40 to 45 times out of 100. Joel Alvarez, I think you go inside the distance with him no matter what. Alvarez inside the distance, that's plus 100. I'm now to the fights where those method of victory numbers have actually posted. So, what I say? Alvarez inside the distance, plus 100. Hit it. That makes a ton of sense. Brenner by knockout, plus 600. And Brenner by decision plus 350. Both make sense. Those are logical numbers. I would go like, let's see, how did it play out for Alvarez? Yeah, I'd maybe say like Elvis Brenner by knockout. I think that's where you go. Plus 600, I think that's worth I think that is the greater value. I think that's worth it. That's fun. Sprinkle a little bit on that. But again, both playable in DFS, and that is going to be a fantastic fight. I think that's one of my sleeper favorites of the card. Next up, and we got 5 fights left, we got a women's strawweight matchup between Mackenzie Dern and Lupi Godinez. Mackenzie Dern is the minus 122 favorite. Godinez the plus 102 underdog. Dern started off at plus 124. and has worked her way to being the favorite. So let's start off with Lupi Godinez. Godinez, born in 1993, actually the winner now of 4 of her last 5 fights, and 6 of her last 8, dating back to November of 2021. Over Loma Lagbume, Ariana Carnelosi, Cynthia Calvillo, Emily Ducote, those were all by decision. And then gets a finish finally against Elise Reed by submission September 2023. Then back to, winning a close decision against Tabitha Ricci November of last year at UFC 295. And now, her only loss since August of 2022, and that was 5 fights ago at this point, her only loss is by unanimous decision to Virna Jandiroba. It was 29-28 on 2 of the judges' scorecards. She outstruck her 38-30, did get taken down twice, and that Virna Jandiroba loss has aged fantastically for her. It's either, for Lupi, the last 3 fights now, the last 3 that went the distance that she won. 87 strikes against Cynthia Calvillo, 132 against Ducote, and 98 against Tabitha Ricci. Mackenzie Dern, all right, she's got 1 win in her last 4 and 2 in her last 6 against Tisha Pennington by split decision April of 2022, and by unanimous decision over Angela Hill May of 2023, outstriking her 126-66, 3 takedowns and a knockdown. She is coming off 2 straight now. So look who's beating her. Title challenger Yan Xiaonan, October 2022. Former champion Jessica Andrade, November of last year. Knocked her down 4 times. And former title challenger Amanda Lemos, February of 2024 at UFC 298. And she has a win over Virna Jandiroba 4 years ago. This has just been a very, very different Mackenzie Dern than we saw between May of 2020 and April of 2021, where she got a lot of great work in. It's just been inconsistent performances and weird game plans and weird approaches and just thinking, what the hell are you doing? And it's got to be frustrating for those who have, wagered on Mackenzie Dern over that stretch. That's 3 really, former title challengers or champions that you've lost to. Yet the only win in that stretch is against Angela Hill, in a time when Lupi Godinez has looked fantastic. And even Virna Jandiroba, I think that she was in better position to beat Lupi Godinez stylistically. That's just, Virna has really come into her own. She is very clearly a number 1 contender now. And the names aren't there for Lupi. I'll give her that. The names aren't there for Lupi Godinez. And it has taken, it has taken some close decisions for Lupi Godinez to get this winning streak. She very easily could have beaten Angela Hill when they fought August of 2022. It was 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. Lupi has just very quietly put together a really nice run. I think that, if she stays off of the ground with Mackenzie Dern, then I think what happened against, for Angela Hill against Mackenzie Dern, I don't know. It was just this fight against Amanda Lemos. She was not well set up for it. She got dominated by Marina Rodriguez. I don't trust Mackenzie Dern at all. I can't. And that's why she's probably going to win, damn it. But I think this is 50-50. I think if you think Mackenzie Dern can hold her own in the striking, it's only a matter of time until she gets it down to the ground. That's where she'll really thrive. But I think Lupi Godinez can land 80 to 100, plus strikes. And, Mackenzie Dern just might have this weird game plan where she agrees to do that. So Lupi Godinez plus 102, that's where I'm going. I think that this fight goes the distance. Godinez by decision plus 120. Dern by decision plus 275. Both are solid numbers. I guess if you're going inside the distance with someone, you go Dern by submission, that's plus 250. But I like Godinez by decision plus 120. I just can't trust Mackenzie Dern, and she's probably going to win. and then I'll say, all right, well, I'm back on, and then she'll be disappointing in the next one. But no, I'm sticking to this. I'm saying Lupe Godinez is the name I can actually trust in that fight. Next up, we got a welterweight fight between two legends of the division and great personalities. Tony Ferguson against Michael Chiesa. Chiesa is the minus 625 favorite. Tony Ferguson, the plus 455 underdog. Jesus Christ. Well, let's start with Tony Ferguson. All right. The once interim champion. That was now 7 years ago. Wins over guys like Edson Barbosa, Josh Thompson, RDA, Kevin Lee, and Anthony Pettis, Cowboy Cerrone. Okay. Then that interim belt fight against Justin Gaethje, May of 2020. And never looked the same after that. Looked greatly damaged, like neurologically, in that fight. Even though it ended up weirdly close statistically. So now he has lost 7 in a row, and it's been real ugly. Justin Gaethje, Charles Oliveira tore him up. Beneil Dariush dominated him, but it didn't even have to do much. It made Tony look older and slower and not with it anymore. Gets knocked out with a Michael Chandler front kick. Gets subbed by Nate Diaz. Gets subbed by Bobby Green. July of 2023. And then a unanimous decision loss to Paddy Pimblett in a fight where Paddy looked robotic on the feet, but he started fast. He hurt Tony, and Tony had some more moments that made Paddy look not as good. Paddy looked great over the weekend, getting a quick submission against Bobby Green, who thought to shoot a takedown for some reason. The last thing you would ever want him to do in that fight. But that's been a bad run for Tony Ferguson. It just keeps getting worse, and people want him to stop fighting. Born in 1984. Chiesa, born in 1987. This is a dude that's lost 3 in a row, but they've been like real fights. They're not like set up to be like, whatever Tony's have been. It's not as much a sideshow. Michael Chiesa, and I don't want to... Tony hasn't been a sideshow, but when he's booked, it's like, why? It's because of the matchups. It's going to, be appealing to people. They're exciting, but it's because people want to convince themselves that Tony Ferguson still has another win left in him, and that's not necessarily how this sport works all the time. And so 3 straight losses for Michael Chiesa to Vicente Luque, Sean Brady, and Kevin Holland. Darce choked early by Luque and Kevin Holland, but he was on a 4-fight winning streak before that. Unfortunately, it stretches all the way back to December of 2018, because this guy's fought about everybody too. Wins over Beneil Dariush and Jim Miller. Has fought Joe Lozon and Kevin Lee and Anthony Pettis. Really wish he would have beaten Kevin Lee. But, and then Carlos Condit and Diego Sanchez. The last 2, good wins, January of 2020 and 2021, unanimous decision over Rafael Dos Anjos. He needed 6 takedowns and 9 strikes to beat RDA. And then a unanimous decision win over Neil Magny, January of 2021. I got to make this simple. All right. Tony Ferguson is going to be a threat to get a submission. That's something I think he can still do, and I think Michael Chiesa is going to give him those opportunities. But otherwise, there is no reason for me to not opt for Michael Chiesa. Now, Michael Chiesa started off minus 455, and it worked its way to minus 625. I think Chiesa wins this fight like 85 to 90 times out of 100. So maybe plus 455 is a little nuts. But, I'm not going to take a chance on Tony Ferguson. Not at 40 years old and more damaged than ever. I think where you go is Chiesa by decision, plus 125. I think, and, Chiesa could even be a play in DFS, but I think he's going to be expensive. And his statistical output is so unpredictable that it's not a move that I would make. If I'm going, Chiesa by decision plus 125, but Chiesa by submission plus 120, I think those are of equal value. And, maybe even Chiesa by submission is the more likely. Because it's going to be hard to, hurt Tony. Paddy Pimblett didn't finish Tony. So if Chiesa, being older than he's ever been in the octagon. Maybe by decision plus 125 is actually the way to go. And DFS, I'm not feeling either of these two dudes for what I think they're going to be priced at. Next up, we got a bantamweight and Tony Ferguson.
Don't do this. You cannot do this, you know?
We got a bantamweight matchup between Marlon Chito Vera and former flyweight champion Deiveson Figueiredo. Marlon Vera, the plus 120 underdog that started off at minus 105, and Figueiredo, the minus 142 favorite. Let's talk about Chito Vera, all right? So, you know, he had an impressive winning streak, and with some fights that broke it up, like the Aldo loss. But, you know, he got that original win against Sean O'Malley. Then in a row beat Davey Grant, Frankie Edgar, Rob Font, and Dominic Cruz. And what were impressive performances. You know, the two knockout victories that kind of established him, that really let him make his name after O'Malley. Edgar and Dominic Cruz, you know, at a time when the knockouts against those guys meant the least that they ever did before. You lose to Cory Sandhagen by an insane split decision. Had no business being a split decision. In March of 2023, Sandhagen outstruck him 128 to 58, got 3 takedowns to 0. Beats Pedro Munoz by unanimous decision, lands 141 strikes, and then, you know, because he had the win over Sean O'Malley, gets that title shot and got worked throughout the course of that fight. Now, he landed a huge knee at the end of that fight, but you got to do it within 5 rounds. It doesn't really matter what would have maybe happened after the 5th round, because you didn't do it in 5. That's really the most important part about those. Deiveson Figueiredo, 5 years older than Marlon Chito Vera, coming off three wins of his last 4 fights. Now, remember, for 3 years, really 2, for 2 years, all he did was think about Brandon Moreno. There was a draw in there. It was a win for him. 2 losses to Brandon Moreno. Several title defenses, you know, in his history. And has now, you know, won 2 in a row at bantamweight against Rob Font by unanimous decision, outstriking him 45 to 46, 4 takedowns. And then just came off a second-round rear naked choke against Cody Garbrandt. Yeah, so, like, also, Figueiredo will actually have a 2-inch reach disadvantage. That's one thing about flyweight, but, you know, the difference between flyweight and bantamweight. I love Figueiredo for bantamweight. I think he's looked great. We haven't seen him lose at bantamweight yet. Now, the 2 guys that he's fought, and it's weird to not land 150 strikes on Rob Font. He usually makes that easy, but he shut him down pretty well in that fight, December of last year. So, you know, I'm not like a huge Chito believer. You know, past the Dominic Cruz, Rob Font, Frankie Edgar, Pedro Munoz level, I'm not a big believer in Marlon Chito Vera past this point. But I think Figueiredo has like some room to go up at bantamweight. I think that's remains a good weight class for him. He made easy work of Cody Garbrandt when Cody Garbrandt was coming off of 2 straight wins over Trevin Jones and Brian Kelleher in the fashion you would hope, at least against Kelleher. I think that, like, Chito Vera's had his best moments in the UFC. Figueiredo's could still to come. You know, who knows? We might be talking about him as a double champion in short time, but he'd kind of have to make that move quick. You know, with the fights that he's been in. And, you know, being born in 1987, that can be an issue. But Figueiredo, I think he's the more, you know, well-rounded fighter where this goes. I think Chito is going to have success on the feet. He'll land some good shots. But I think Figueiredo is just more dangerous everywhere. If it was 5 rounds, I don't know if I'd have any different feelings. I probably wouldn't. And, you know, Figueiredo minus 142, I think he does win this fight like 65 to 70 times out of 100. So, you know, minus 142 I think is a good number. And this could go so many different ways. Like Figueiredo inside the distance, plus 750. By decision is minus 110. That probably is the most logical pick. And then like Vera by decision, plus 300. I don't think he knocks Davison Figueiredo out. I think Marlon Vera would probably need to land 80 to 100 strikes in this fight to have a chance on the judges' scorecards, but that's his path. And, even in fights that shouldn't be close, he has a weird style that just makes fights closer than maybe they should end up being. So there's always that, and I think that he's obviously very tough, and for what we saw him survive over the course of 5 rounds with Sean O'Malley, will that fight change Chito Vera? Yeah, I think it kind of has to. When you prepare for such a big fight, you lose in such a big way and take 230 punches. I think that weighs in Davison Figueiredo's favor as well. Looking at both these guys in DFS, but feeling better about Figueiredo. Vera, I would need to believe in his chances to win for what that price is going to be. But if he wins, for sure, he's probably going to score pretty well. Now, we're to the co-main event of the evening. We got a middleweight matchup between Michael Alexajuk and Shara the Bullet Magomedov. Magomedov, the minus 238 favorite. Alexajuk, the plus 195 underdog. Let's start it with Michael Alexajuk. All right. Good amount of UFC experience since 2017, mostly since 2019. Winner of 3 of his last 6 fights and 5 of his last 9, I believe. So, where he remains consistent is the guys that he can beat. Sam Alvey, Cody Brundage. He knocked them out in the first round. He knocked out Chidi Njokuani in the first round, August of 2023. He's remained active. 2 fights in 2023, 2 this year already. His, losses to Calbarello by rear naked choke, Michel Pereira by rear naked choke, and Kevin Holland by armbar. Those are his last 3 losses, all by submission. You got to go back to March of 2022 against Dustin Jacoby when he lost by decision. But 2 other submission losses to OSP and Jimmy Crute. You go back not too much further. Shara the Bullet. All right, won by unanimous decision against Bruno Silva in his UFC debut, outstriking him 113-65. He did get taken down 3 times. And then he's coming off a 3rd-round knockout win over Antonio Tricoli back in June of this year, actually. Way more recent than I remember. Not long ago at all. And he's actually a little bit older than Alexajuk. Alexajuk, wins against Modestas Bukauskas, Shamil Gamzatov, Brundage, Njokuani. Okay, but, a lot of people have made it look easy against Michael Alexajuk, and it's a certain tier of competition. This is a test for Shara the Bullet, for sure, for a guy that's, had so many UFC fights and still isn't, old. And in fact, I think, what did I say? I actually think Alexajuk is a bit younger. And before coming into the UFC, it was just a lot of knockout victories for Shara. And I think that we have at least legitimized his professional pedigree before coming into the UFC now. So, Alexajuk, I don't think he has been knocked out in the UFC ever. Could Shara the Bullet do it? Sure. Absolutely. The easiest path against Michael Alexajuk definitely seems to be, submission. It seems to be kind of dangerous to strike with Michael Alexajuk if you're in his playing field. If you are within his competitive limits, Shara might just be a little bit outside of that. It's early for Shara the Bullet. Minus 238 seems a little crazy. This line has not moved much. I think it started off at plus 220 for Alexajuk, and then people hit it a little bit, and it was adjusted. And so you got Magomedov minus 238. Magomedov by knockout is plus 110. Unfortunately, Magomedov by submission is plus 1,600. I wish that was a possibility because it's where Alexajuk has proven so vulnerable. Magomedov by decision plus 330. Yeah, it's hard to think that, Shara, that it would work that well, that he would end up being the first guy to knock out Michael Alexajuk in the UFC. But yeah, I think he can definitely get it done plus 110, but plus 330 might make just a little bit more sense. I think that he'll be able to easily match the power of Alexa Juk. I think that even if they created similar numbers in the striking, maybe neither of these guys goes out, but I think that, Shar is the one set up to do more damage. He might even take some good shots from Alexa Juk, and that'll keep it interesting. But Magomedov by decision plus 330 makes sense to me. And if you're going Mikhail Alexa Juk, I don't know, just take plus 195. What did I say? I do think Shara wins this fight maybe 65 to 70 times out of 100. Maybe probably closer to 65. So minus 238 doesn't seem good. Plus 195 for Alexa Juk. I think that's a good value on him. It's hard to also say that you think Shara loses by knockout. So maybe you don't go method of victory for Alexa Juk. And this is one I don't know. I don't know if I'm going with either of these guys in DFS. Alexa Juk could be a good value if he's winning it's by knockout, and I think Shara, it's a similar, logic. I just think that he's going to be in high demand this week, and I think that your money could be better spent elsewhere. But if Shara gets this win and makes it look impressive, then that's another guy that it's like, all right, well now, Jesus Christ, who's he going to fight next? That is an exciting guy, and if he wins, he's a popular guy. Obviously, the whole eye thing. He's an interesting personality. Got some weird aspects to that too. If you've seen the video of him on the escalator getting into the fight with a couple that was kissing or holding hands or something, it was a weird action. But yeah, if he wins, it's going to be even more exciting to think about what's next.
Break out the red panties.
And now, about an hour in, we are to the main event of the evening.
Break out the red panties.
You just played it, decided to play it again. It is a bantamweight matchup between Cory Sandhagen and Umar Nurmagomedov. Now, look, we all know that Sean O'Malley is fighting Merab at UFC Noche and defending the UFC bantamweight belt. It makes all the sense in the world that the winner of this fight is the guy that's going to fight, the winner of Merab and Sean O'Malley. If Sean O'Malley beats Merab, then, I don't know what the UFC would really want to happen. Probably Sandhagen to win. So you can get Sandhagen versus O'Malley, and but Umar Nurmagomedov. Now I don't know what kind of audience he draws. I haven't seen any numbers or any conversation on that. But Umar Nurmagomedov, that's a nightmare for having in a title fight against Sean O'Malley. And I don't know how much they would want to do Umar Nurmagomedov versus Merab, even though they might force their hand here. But here's the thing about Cory Sandhagen that I've said many, many times on this podcast. Cory Sandhagen has never fought for a real title. He fought for the interim bantamweight title against Petr Yan in a fight that he lost by unanimous decision. It was a fight that I maybe thought that he won, but it was by unanimous decision. It was a good fight, but he gave himself a really good chance. And TJ Dillashaw, I thought he beat TJ Dillashaw. He's now coming off 3 straight wins against Song Yadong by 4th round knockout, a ridiculous split decision that shouldn't have been a split decision against Marlon Chito Vera, and then a dominant unanimous decision win over Rob Font August of last year, outstriking him 34-9 over 5 rounds and taking him down 7 times to 1. Cory Sandhagen, despite the opportunities that he's missed on, the loss to Yan, the original, submission loss to Aljamain Sterling. For those fights, at his best, Cory Sandhagen very well still might be the number 1 bantamweight in the world on any given night. I still really believe that if this guy gets another shot at a belt, then he has all the opportunity in the world to become a champion. Cory Sandhagen has been so dangerous since he came into the UFC, but really when he got that win over Marlon Moraes, it really heated up And yeah, I think he should have that win against TJ Dillashaw, but he stepped up after 2 straight losses. It was a tough spot for him and got 3 straight wins over 3 straight ranked bantamweights. Umar Nurmagomedov, born in 1996, he's 4 years younger. He will have a 1-inch reach disadvantage. He's 3 inches shorter than the lanky Cory Sandhagen. This guy is 5-0 in the UFC with 3 finishes over Sergey Morozov, who he took down 5 times. Brian Kelleher, he finished him quickly with a first-round submission in a fight that they wanted to just throw together to get an opponent for him, and Brian Kelleher willing to step into that buzzsaw. Unanimous decision over the recently cut Nate Maness. And apparently after a great fan reaction, he's been back in contact with the UFC. He's got a win over Andy Barcelos by first-round knockout January of last year. And March of this year, a unanimous decision win over Bekzat Almakhan, outstriking him 68-3 over 3 rounds. Got knocked down once, but landed 5 takedowns. That is a combined 14 takedowns across 5 UFC fights, 3 finishes in that time. All right, look. Cory Sandhagen is plus 260. Started off at plus 225, and he is plus 260. Umar Nurmagomedov, the minus 325 favorite. Let's keep this one simple, too. Cory Sandhagen.
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
Oh, don't be scared, homie. Come on.
Umar Nurmagomedov, the best fighter that he has beaten so far has been Randy Barcelos. Arguably Nate Maness is not Bekzat Almakhan, even though he was able to hurt Umar Nurmagomedov. All right, we've really haven't seen anybody have any real success against Umar Nurmagomedov other than Bekzat being able to hurt him, and that's dangerous against Cory Sandhagen. You know, Cory Sandhagen has fought all of the toughest guys at bantamweight. Not Sean O'Malley yet. That's the one that we're waiting for. Not Merab, but you fought the Yans and didn't give it. You should have beaten TJ Dillashaw. You landed almost a combined 300 strikes against those 2 guys. 128 against Vera. Yeah, Cory Sandhagen is a dangerous grappler. He's lanky. That's a challenge for a guy like Umar Nurmagomedov to draw him into the quicksand. And on the feet, Umar is going to be vulnerable. Cory Sandhagen is too damn good of a bantamweight, possibly the best bantamweight in the world if he gets another opportunity at that, to have it plus 260. I think at the wildest estimation, I think you think that this is close to a 50-50 fight. You know, how much do you believe in Umar Nurmagomedov and the last name Nurmagomedov, what he's done in 5 UFC fights, and what do you remember about Cory Sandhagen at his best? You know, so Umar Nurmagomedov, I think if he gets this win, it's probably by decision. It's going to be 5 rounds, and that's a different thing for Umar too. You know, so watch that. I think that you would just have to say that, like, if he beats Cory Sandhagen, it's because he's Nurmagomedov. You look at his statistical output in his 5 UFC fights and think that he'll be able to get Cory Sandhagen down. There's not going to be a lot that Sandhagen can do about it. I don't think it's going to be that simple. Sandhagen presents a lot of stylistic problems for Umar Nurmagomedov, and I think Cory Sandhagen is going to be able to put a scare into Umar on the feet. I think he's going to be able to hurt him. And so I don't really care about a method of victory because this fight could go chaotically. Umar by decision is probably the single clearest method of victory. That is plus 110. And then, like, what? Umar by submission? That's plus 275? No, Umar by decision. And that's where it gets tricky, right? Because it's the 5-round fighting experience. And I don't need to pick a method of victory. I love Cory Sandhagen at plus 260. Hit it. Ow! Hit it again. DFS-wise, I'm going to be rocking Cory Sandhagen in at least 50% of my lineups. I might make some lineups with Umar if the price makes sense for me, just for some variation. But I'm going to love Sandhagen in DFS this week. It's going to be a big gamble of a play, but like plus 260, that doesn't make any sense. That's insulting. He's just too damn good to have, as that much of an underdog. But I'm looking forward to UFC Abu Dhabi. I'm looking forward to a card that isn't going to be so late at night, getting it done in the middle of the day in a beautiful stretch of time. And again, we got a lot of great MMA. PFL, 1, LFA, big boxing with Terrence Crawford. And folks, that is it for episode 145 of RotoBallers' official MMA podcast. Tap that. Again, follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady for all my picks on all major MMA events, UFC Fight Pass events, boxing matches, on Twitter at RotoBrady. Follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on YouTube, Facebook, and Spotify. Come out to the RotoBaller MMA Discord on Saturday. Let's talk about UFC Abu Dhabi. Let's talk about DFS, and let's talk about your MMA gambling approaches for this card. Check out my weekly MMA DFS Values Picks article for picks on DraftKings that's coming out Fridays. So check that out and get who I think of the juiciest little values here for UFC Abu Dhabi. We got interlude episodes, in the works between guys that are, out of college football and looking for their professional opportunities. We love to talk about that stuff too on Tap That. Folks, thanks for listening. Have yourselves a great weekend. Enjoy UFC Abu Dhabi and all the other major MMA that we got going on this week. And a peace.
Break out the red panties.